You guys, I thought it was going to be a little bit darker in here, but I forgot about the time change. So, Masochisia, for everyone that doesn't know, my name is John. I've been hanging around on the Slack channel for a while. I haven't made it to as many meetups as I'd like because I'm over in Fort Worth, so a little bit of a drive over. But I'm here to talk about Masochisia in the last 6 months, basically after release. We're actually at about 7 months now, but I'm just going to be kind of covering really the first 6 months. Just to clarify up front a few disclaimers on it. Number one would be that I was planning on adding in a bunch of cool graphs from Steam that I probably wouldn't, or actually shouldn't be allowed to show, but my hard drive crashed over the weekend, so there's just a lot of text mostly in here. So there's going to be no cool graphs. The second point that I want to throw out on this is just the data from one game, which means it may or may not have any impact on your games. Your games could do way better than this, your games could do way worse than this. So just throwing that out there, take that as a caveat on the data that you're about to talk about. So if you're not familiar with the game, I'll give you guys just a little bit of background information on it. So it's called, or what I called a narrative horror game, because I didn't really know what else to call it. For the most part, it's really, really simple gameplay mechanics. It's put together over 6 months. It's just a 2D game where you just kind of scroll around. You can interact a few basic puzzles throughout, but for the most part, you're just talking to people. There's just very, very dialogue heavy, very, very narrative heavy. And the idea being that just as you're playing this game, it's a very depressing game. It's a very kind of morbid game that's covering a lot of intense topics. So it's not a very traditional game. I released it on October 9th for Windows, Mac, and Linux. Just put it up on Steam. That's the only place it's on right now. So kind of touching just a little bit on the content. So just at a super high level, it was all based on a true story, and it's basically about kind of a hypothetical look at the life of a famous serial killer, but you're kind of starting off from him as a child. So you're playing someone who will grow up to become probably one of the worst serial killers in world history. And it's just kind of this look at what his childhood may have been like. It's based a lot on real data. It's based a little bit from my own personal experiences, and just kind of exploring just some weird topics that don't really get covered much in video games. So it started off as kind of just a personal way for me to work through some stuff. I had just come off a really long project. I wanted to do something really quick, kind of work through some issues, and I didn't think anyone would play it. Then I put a demo up on itch, and basically it took off. So I was like, all right, I'll just go ahead and finish it. So that's kind of the idea. So it had a surprisingly positive reception. When I put it up, my first reaction was, no one's going to buy this game, because it's just, no one wants to play a game that's depressing. And second off, if they did play it, they would say this isn't a very fun game because I didn't have any fun when I played it. But the reception I found was, for the most part, very positive too. So it came out on the 9th, and this is just touching on just a couple of the feedbacks I got from different websites and stuff. And the big one up there is actually, I took that as a huge compliment. And they did give it a positive review. They said it's one of the most distressing video games in existence. So I was like, this was my goal, and I've accomplished it. So let's talk a little bit about data. So first off, why do I want to talk about the sales from the game? And first off, I think just to help set expectations for other people that are working on games or releasing games. If you've ever gotten to the point where you're working on a game project and you're about to go on Steam, when you get up to that release point, you have absolutely no idea what you're going to get from release point. You have no idea what's a good day, what's a bad day. You don't know if you're going to sell 100 copies, 1,000 copies, 10,000. It's nothing. The only data you'll probably find online is going to be from people that were really, really successful, and that's it. The people that weren't very successful probably don't want to talk about it. So that's why I wanted to talk about it. And hopefully, like I said, it'll provide a baseline. I should have added an asterisk in there, but like I said, just kind of notating this is just one game. So kind of take that in mind when you're looking at the sales data. And also just to encourage transparency. I think it's important regardless of whether your game is ultra successful, mildly successful, or a total failure, you just try to share the data that you do have just to help other people kind of set their own expectations. Because I think what we're going to see in the future, and we're already kind of seeing it now, as more games are getting on Steam, I think we're going to see a lot of indie developers disappear that first time they get on Steam after working on a game for 2 years. They put it up there, it sells 500 copies, and they're like, shit, I am not going to make a penny on this game. And then you got to kind of decide, am I going to keep making my next game knowing that I may never actually make whatever money I'm dumping into this game back? So hopefully, like I said, we can help set some transparency out for everyone who's working on games right now. So I'm just going to start from the beginning. I'm just going to really high level kind of talk about basically what the launch week was like, and then talk about the sales that I've participated in through Steam over the last 6 months and kind of talking about whether you should or shouldn't participate in Steam sales. So, like I said, going into launch week, I had no idea what to expect, particularly considering just what the game was about, what its content was, what it was like. I really didn't have any idea. So, launch day, it sold 149 copies. Still, I have no idea if that's a normal day. I don't know if that's a good day or a bad day. I kind of took it as like, okay, that's a start. I knew right off the bat, pretty much from the get-go, what that meant was this game's not going to let me quit my job. So that kind of, I didn't know that going into it. Because you know, the best I think that a lot of people do is you sort of scope out what's the best and worst case scenarios that you think are going to happen. And you're kind of probably budgeting in, how much do I need to make for me to go part-time at this, or full-time at this, or whatever it is. And that's the baselines we're working on. But those baselines are really just based on numbers that we know we need to hit, not necessarily on what we think we're actually going to get. So 149 copies on the first day, 461 copies over the first week. So, like I said, for the most part, I would consider that a pretty quiet launch, I think, by anyone's expectations. I've seen games, and I've worked with other developers that have launched games that sold half of that in their first week on Steam.
What was the launch price?
$7.99. So that was one of the challenges of the game, because the game itself, you can beat it depending on how much you want to go around and talk to people in as little as an hour and a half. And it could go for about 2.5 hours, but that's it. For the most part, it's the equivalent of sort of participating in a movie. So I knew I couldn't go at probably a normal price rate. And even at $7.99, some of the negative feedback that I do get on the game is that it's overpriced, which I'm a developer, so I say bullshit. But, yeah, so take that for whatever it's worth going into it. So that was my first week sale. So like I said, it wasn't, I'm super pessimistic about basically everything in life, so I was like, okay, it could have been worse. That was sort of my take on the first week sales. Because of the fact of when I launched the game, fall and Christmas were right around the corner. So right off the bat, I'm kind of hit with this question of, do I need to even be participating in these sales that are coming up a month and 2 months after my game has come out? And those are obviously, for most people who are aware, those are probably two of the biggest sales that happen on Steam every year. A lot of people wait for these sales, Christmas in particular. And I knew pretty much right off the bat, even though the game was selling copies every day, that I was probably going to have to participate in the sales. So then it becomes a matter of sort of figuring out, okay, well, how do I want to devalue my game slowly? So basically, you kind of start tearing out, and just in my head, I was like, we're going to start off with my first sale is going to be extreme, it'll be relatively low. And then we'll start moving up to higher percentage sales, kind of just based on what results we're getting. And then my kind of core baselines were, do not pass the 50% mark until you're at least 6 months out of launch, and don't go pretty much any much deeper than that until you're at least a year out from launch. So at least you've milked whatever people that are willing to buy it at decent sale prices or full price, you could have it. So I did like to participate in both. One thing that's kind of important to note on this, it's not really relevant to sales data, but I did find that I had some success with this leading up to the sales. Follow up with press and YouTubers after your launch. Leverage whatever little amounts of feedback and news articles you're getting and reach back out to the same people, and you would be surprised how much you'll hear back from people after they see other people covering it. And I got a lot of responses back from articles and websites that said, oh, I didn't see that, and they followed up. I don't know, maybe they did see it, but they just didn't care until other people started writing about it. But just want to kind of throw that out there. Once you hit release, that doesn't mean you're not allowed to send out another press release. Do it again, it doesn't hurt anything yet. You don't have anything to lose. So the fall sale was a 1 week sale. I did 25% off and sold 135 copies, which I think for the most part was pretty mediocre, again, I think you could say. For the most part, though, there was a lot of feedback in general from the developers I know that participated at that fall sale. It was a pretty low sale just across the board for everyone that participated in it. Wasn't a lot of impressions anyone was getting on their sales. And I think for the most part, the market's kind of shifting towards there's not a lot of reason to participate in that sale, knowing that Christmas is right around the corner. So most gamers are just going to wait for Christmas. The Christmas sale came shortly after that, at the end of December into the first week of January, and it lasts for 2 weeks. So kind of after the cool launch and the relatively cool first sale that I participated in, I was like, all right, we're going to bump it up to 40%. So I'm already kind of quicker than I expected, aiming towards that 50% mark. I was like, what the hell, let's just go for it. So it was a 2 week sale at 40% off, and ended up selling a little over 500 copies. sounds a little bit better, so it's kind of moving in the right direction. But you have to keep in mind that obviously it's a higher discount percentage than what we had on the fall sale, so your margins are down a little bit. And I think this is around the time when I've kind of just started realizing at this point, the way I need to look at my game is not so much that I'm trying to deliberately devalue my game, but kind of just looking at, this game's not going to sell 1 million copies. It's not going to sell 100,000 copies. It's probably not even going to sell 10,000 copies. So what can I do to just get as big of an audience as I can to actually play the game? That way I can start having these people, maybe it's 500 people, maybe it's 1,000, 2,000, whatever it is, that they've played one of my games before and they know who I am. So when I'm working on the next game, they'll come back around and maybe want to play the next game. So that's kind of where my mind started shifting over towards that, is sort of realizing that I'm not going to get rich on this game, so let's just grow my audience.
Real quick, what was the base price? And what did 25% off bring it down to?
It was $7.99, so I mean it took off like
$5.99?
Yeah, pretty close to that. The reason I went with the 40% on Christmas is because it actually dropped it down to like $4.79, and it below that $5 level. So that was one of the reasons why I decided to go that extra bit, just to knock it below there, because I have seen that that does actually help get more views, because there are a lot of people that shop in that $5 or less bin during the holidays. So they did something they've never done before, and that was they followed up with the lunar sale this year in, I think, February. So I got the email basically saying, hey, do you want to participate in the lunar sale? And my first reaction was, hell no, because we just had 2 sales basically in 2 months leading up to that. So I really didn't think that I wanted to go forward with it. But, you know, it was kind of like I said, my mind was starting to shift over towards that focus of just growing the audience that I have. So I decided I'd go ahead and participate in it. Like I said, I almost didn't participate too soon. So I basically opted to mirror what I did at Christmas time, which was basically to use that 40% again, because what I didn't want to do is piss off people that just bought the game a month and a half ago at a discount, so at least we'll mirror it. One thing to note on that, based on data that Steam recently released since then, they highly discourage you for putting the same game out at the same sale at a constant rate. They said based on their data, it will have a negative impact on your sales. They see a lot more data than I do, so I'll take them at their word. But just kind of throwing that out there. So this is based on my experience, but just keep that in the back of your mind. They recommend you don't do this. So that it was a 1-week sale for 40% off, and it sold over 1,200 copies, which makes no sense when you first see that, because it sold 500 copies at the exact same discount that lasted 2 weeks, and then in 1 week it sold almost 200 copies a day. So what drove that was this. For whatever reason, Steam decided that for all the categories, they would have 20 to 22 games on their list, and they'd shuffle the priority completely random. You could hit refresh each time and watch it jump from 1 all the way down to 22 and back up to 1. And they never shifted the games over the course of the week. So day 1 it happens, and I'm seeing that I'm selling like 400 copies on the first day, and I'm kind of freaking out because I don't know what's going on. See this, and then I'm thinking, okay, so that'll disappear tomorrow. It didn't disappear, and they kept it up the whole week. I don't know. I have no idea what the logic was behind that, but it was really cool for me.
Valve logic.
Sucks for everybody else that was on the horror games that weren't on that list. But it had over and this is where I was going to pull graphs in, I'm forgetting, something like 2.5 million impressions that week, which equals out to roughly 19,000 visits on the store page. People have clicked through. So what it reiterated for me, and this is kind of when I realized this, it sucked at some level, which was that impressions are what makes or breaks your game. You could have a relatively mediocre game. If you can get a ton of impressions on your game is going to sell copies. You have a good game and you get a ton of impressions, you're going to sell a shit ton of copies. That just seems to be the way that works. So at some level, it was kind of disappointing that I had the best week ever 4 months after launch, which when you think about it like that, that's also a really weird concept to have. That you shouldn't be having the best week of your game 4 months after it's out. But I did, but it was totally because of nothing that I did. It was just Steam, for whatever reason, liked the game and said, you know what, we're going to put it up and it's going to be up there for a week. So after that, I was starting to feel like pretty good about sales. What I was kind of realizing too, and this is something that's kind of worth noting, but once again is only really relevant on my game at least, I didn't see my daily sales between these sales go down. I sold the same number of copies that I sold before the sales as I did after the sales. Which when you think about that, it doesn't really make a lot of sense either, but it was the case. And what I noticed from launch, leading up to the lunar sale, my daily sales at full price actually went up by about 20%. So do with that information whatever you will. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but it was trending up. I think part of that may have to do with the fact that when the game launched, there was no reviews or anything for it. And then slowly, as more people got on sale and more people bought it, my reviews on Steam were going up. And I think because it was getting a really positive reception from the Steam reviews, I was sitting at, I think, like a 95% rating on Steam. I think that was driving why people were still buying it at full price, even though it had been out for a while. So I think that has a way bigger factor than I think a lot of people realize are the reviews on your Steam page. So I decided to do a weekly standalone sale, which basically means that I was going to participate in one of their week-long deals, so not associated with any holiday, but I'd never done anything that wasn't outside of a sale, and it felt really soon, once again, because this was about 2 months after the lunar sale. But this was really just more of a test just to see, like, all right, let's just try something different. So, well, by something different, I mean do the exact same thing. 40% off in 1 week. So that's what I did. I was like, well, it seems to be working. We're just going to keep rolling with it. And also, it hadn't been 6 months. I wasn't going to do an arbitrary number, but I'm not going to do 50% until it's been at least 6 months. So I did another one for 40% off. Once again, not really knowing it's a holiday event. I don't know if that's good or bad, but let's just find out. It sold a little over 700 copies, which makes even less sense, too, because there was no big promotions going on. It still sold quite well. What I've kind of taken from that, for me, was when you put something up during the holidays, Christmas time, there's something like I think this last Christmas we had over 10,000 games on sale at Christmas time. On the week-long deals, there's an average of 300 to 350 games on sale. So what I was worried about was everyone is looking for deals at Christmas time, but what you forget is there's 10,000 games you have to sort through to find out what's on sale. On the week-long deal with 300 games, if you sort it by highest rating, my game was like 4th or 5th on the list. That means that if you just sort by what's a good game on sale this week, you're going to end up at the top. So that's kind of what I'm attributing that to, is the week-long deals are maybe even better in some ways than participating in the bigger sales, just because of the fact you're competing with a much smaller audience of games. I'll try to keep moving here. So the total sales, my average at full price was 35 to 40 copies per week over the first 5 months, and that was at full price. It started off, I was averaging somewhere closer to about 15 to 20 over the first month at full price, but then as the months went on, like I said, the ratings were going up, and I was selling more copies. So in between my sales, I'd have a sale, and then the next week I'd still sell another 40 copies at full price. That is now starting to slow down. I was kind of wondering if it's going to keep trending up, and basically from month 6 on, and today's actually the 7-month anniversary of the game, it's kind of dipped down. I'm averaging about 25 copies a week now at full price. But considering the fact that in 6 months I've participated in, I think, 4 sales, I think that's still pretty good that it's still selling usually around 2 to 4 copies every day. So I kind of, for people I think that are nervous about sales kind of impacting and devaluing your work, I think it does do that, but it may not be quite to the extent that people realize. And I think part of that just has to do with the fact that a lot of these people didn't know what your game was before they happened to browse it. So they don't know if your game was on sale yesterday, they don't know if your game was on sale 2 months ago or not. No, some of them do. There's a lot of people that actually track that stuff, but I think a lot of people don't. And then basically over 6 months, it sold just a little under 4,000 copies. So it has bounced back, I think, better than what I expected it would over the first month or so, but still in the grand scheme of things, this is a super small success, I think, for most people. It's about 1,400 copies have sold at full price, and about 2,600 copies at various discounts, and I think the median was somewhere around like 30%. I haven't looked in a little while, but that's basically about where it netted out on the percentages. So just some real quick, questions that I get a lot, and some of my final thoughts on it. So a lot of people ask me, do I feel like the game was a success? I think so, yeah. I think for a game that I didn't think would sell a copy, I think it was very successful. I think it had a really low budget. I think it had something like $8,000 on it. So it was a pretty small budget, which it more than doubled since then. So I guess you could call that a success. I think for a lot of people, if they had a game and it sold like this would be a crushing defeat. But for me, like I said, I think personally it was a success. Do I feel like the sales value work? Like I said, I've already kind of touched on that, so I'll just keep moving. Did you quit your job? No, I did not quit my job. Can you survive on indie games that aren't bestsellers? So this is kind of an interesting question, so I'll just touch base on this real quick before we end the slide. I think you can, if you're in the right place in life. And by the right place in life, I probably mean the place that everyone else would say you're in the totally wrong place in life. If you're, maybe live with your parents, or you don't have a mortgage, or maybe you're not married, I think it's totally possible to survive. If you have low cost of living, you can probably make it work on this. Like I said, the game came out, or was developed over 6 months, and it grossed, I think, just a little under like $23,000. That was before Steam got their cut, of course. But if you can do that twice a year, you could probably live on that after all of your expenses and after Steam gets their cut. You could probably do that if you could churn out 2 decent quality games on Steam twice a year. That's obviously way easier said than done. But I think you can make a living out of it if you're willing to work really, really hard at it. I elected not to do that on my next game, so my next game is not going to be 6 months. But yeah, so I think that's just kind of a general question that I do get a lot, and that's kind of my take on it. So with all that said, I think that's it. Yeah. Any questions on anything? I was going to try to show more data on impressions and stuff like that. I didn't have it. Just to give you guys a high-level look, it's 10.5 million impressions and 125,000 stored pages in 6 months. Yeah.
Did you have, you said you contacted the YouTube follow-up. Did you contact any streamers, like real-time streamers?
Yes. At first, I didn't have a lot of them on my list just because I really wasn't looking for that. And just to be honest, I probably am less familiar with like Twitch than I should be. But yeah, I did, and I had a couple of them end up picking it up and streaming it, but not a lot. I really didn't have a lot of big YouTubers pick up on the game. A lot of small ones. But one thing I found too, I had a few big YouTubers, Cinnamon Toast Ken, and a few other guys that have 1 to 2 million subscribers, so decent size. What I actually found was kind of odd on that though is some of the people that have the smaller, like $100,000 to $200,000 bases, are a lot more passionate than the people that have the 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 million. And the videos from people with 100,000 subscribers will get as many views as the people with 2 million. And I think it's because those people are so obsessed with that person that they watch every single video. Whereas if Cinnamon Toast Can is putting up 3 videos a day, you may watch a couple of those a week, but unless you're a hardcore fan, you're probably not going to watch all.
Interesting.
Yes. Yeah.
So to what degree did you do marketing, social media, any of that kind of stuff? Because I just looked you up on Twitter and I see a bunch of mentions about the game, but I don't see an actual handle. So
yeah, I am on Twitter. I don't have like a big following or anything like that, and I didn't market the game nearly enough. And part of that was because, like I said, in the beginning, especially really the whole first half of it, I didn't plan on really doing anything with the game. And then when the demo did well, so basically over a 3-month window, I started playing catch up. There was one trailer that came out for the Greenlight campaign. That was the only trailer I did. I sent it out to press outlets. Not a single person covered it because it was a game that is coming out in a month that no one's ever heard of. I did contact, there was a decent number of YouTubers that found the game through, Game Jolt ended up featuring, because after an itch took off, I put it on Game Jolt, and it did even better on Game Jolt. So there's a lot of YouTubers that browse that, not big ones, but like I said, a lot of decent sized ones that were browsing on Game Jolt. They played it, and a lot of them, when it came back out, they were sort of my first rounds of contacts, because I knew that they played the game and they liked it. So I just resent it out to them, and then just sort of organically, as I'd get a couple little reviews, and I'd reach out to other people. Rock, Paper, Shotgun, and Polygon, and a few other decent-sized sites that ignored me at launch, wrote again after I sent them over some clips from like The Escapist and a few other smaller places. So, like I said, leverage who you got. Yeah.
Did you notice any sort of correlation with people putting your game on their wish list, or any correlation between like putting it on their wish list and buying the game later or something?
14,000 people put it on their wish list, and 1,600 of them approximately have bought it or gifted it. Steam says 23% of people that put it on their wish list buy it, and people that put it on their wish list, like 50% of them buy it in basically a week after you put it on your list, and like 49% buy it like 6 months after they put it on their wish list, and then everyone else sort of falls in the middle. So when people are adding it on, it is sort of a good gauge of interest. Like I said, I know that there's right now, like when you subtract out the 1,600, there's something like 11,600 or whatever people that have the game currently on their wish list, which is cool for me to know that there's at least that group that I can try to slowly kind of cater my sales towards. But it's kind of interesting to note that a lot of when they add it on there, like I said, if they don't buy it pretty much right off the bat, they're probably going to be on your wish list for a long time. So, which I've done the same thing. I have like games on my wish list that I forgot that I added on there like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So, you have a question?
I have a question about as with these sales with Steam goes, do they take their percentage cut based on the base value of it, or do they also?
It's a
take out the sale?
they don't negotiate that stuff anymore. It's just flat 30% on everything.
30%
So,
of
yeah. So regardless, if you discount your game half off, they still get 30% of whatever that is. So
Okay, so
their percentages don't change.
Gig for
They don't
Valve.
take it off the undiscounted price. They take it off.
That would be.
They take off what you sell it at.
Yeah, basically.
Because then if you
Oh,
sold it for 10%, you'd be paying them.
Yeah. It's whatever. Yeah, it's
As if Valve needs money.
whatever your gross is. Yeah.
So just to drill down more specifically on the point you made earlier, the recontacting press point, specifically, was there any press that had covered you beforehand that you then reached out to contact again?
No, because that was sort of the problem. I think I had nothing to go off. So like you guys, I know you guys have gotten some press. But my recommendation for you guys would be leading up to that launch, leverage, phrases, snippets of stuff like that into your press. Because I think that has a way bigger sway than I think developers probably realize. I had nothing to go on at launch, and because of that, I had like Gamers Hell and a couple other places that you've never heard of covered it on launch day,
Hell.
and like
Oh, I
that's
remember
it.
them.
Yeah. So, and I sent out 400 press releases in the 24 hours leading up to it, and got like 2 coverages.
Did you tailor your press releases at all, or is it just a
Everyone
boilerplate?
was to one person. I didn't mass
Whew.
send anything. So if I
Whew.
had a name, I
Yeah,
put
that's a
name.
lot of work.
Yeah. Oh, it took me like 9 hours, I think.
Yeah. It's
Yes.
You mentioned it cost you $8,000, I think, to develop it. What was included in that cost?
Licenses, hardware. There's a lot of licenses, not just on software. Upgrading.
Where'd you build it in?
Unity.
Okay.
Lots of licenses, hiring musicians, hiring people to do stuff that I couldn't do in some areas, plugins for things. The game was built completely out of a ridiculous finite state machine. So like, I'm not a great programmer, so it was built. It started off really simple and clean, but by the end it was a total mess, and I would not recommend doing that. But yeah, so that's basically what it's going for. Like hiring musicians, I had to license huge libraries of sound effects because in a game about being a psychopathic serial killer, surprisingly, there's not a lot of sound effects for the stuff that happens in the game. So you have to, and you don't want to Google it either because I don't want to end up on anybody's list. It's literally like this. I had to piecemeal so much stuff together.
Do you have that movie trailer you can show us?
You don't have sound.
Yeah, so we
now.
okay. Yeah, I can show it to you. Yeah, I haven't. It's not on here now, but yeah, and I think I paid. There was a band that I was a big fan of, and I paid them like $500 fee to license their music for the trailer and stuff like that. So there's a few different things that all kind of added up into it. As a whole, like that was not like expenses for me to live off of. I said, work a full-time job, so it was just paying for whatever I could to keep the project moving. Because my main goal was just I want to finish this as soon as possible. So. Any other questions? Yeah. Go ahead.
I know that like for us, in a lot of games that like kind of do a little bit of a shorter duration of like gameplay. So like one of the big concerns is if you come below, I think like that 2-hour mark, then of course you can return the game to Steam now. Have you had many issues with that? And if so, like do you even get notified when that happens, or do people reach out to you to talk about it?
You
like the
don't.
Firewatch situation.
Oh, has he?
You don't get notices about it, but you can look up the data. If you're willing to dig, it's a huge pain in the ass because you have to dig way deep into a pretty archaic system to find the refund data, but you can find it. And it's something, I think my average is right around like 2.5% refund rate. So depending on your perspective, that's either going to sound really high or really low. For the most part, I think that's about what the global average is. It's pretty close to that. High is, I think, when you start passing 5%, and low would be if you're only getting 1% back. That's super low.
But you've had some really interesting responses on.
They can optionally leave notes on there, so you can gauge what kind of reactions you're going to get. And I've had some pretty fun ones. People that said it was just they weren't, given enough warning that it was a disturbing game, even though there's an age gate to click on the page, and there's a warning on the store page, and there's a warning when you start the game that asks you, are you sure? And if you didn't know, quit the game. But it was still, yeah, I know, yeah, and yeah, it's.
I'm gonna.
So so you can read notes, and one thing worth noting too is I've had people refund the game that have also emailed me because they were really upset with me making this game, and they had, because I was able to see, because they also left a negative review, they had almost 3 hours of playtime. So it's not a hard 2-hour line. So as unfortunate as that is, just because they're at 2.1 hours doesn't mean they can't refund
They
it.
probably just like walked away from the computer because they were so disgusted.
It
Like,
could have
I can't do this.
Flip the table.
The cool thing about that guy was, he was actually a child psychologist, and so he was extra
Oh.
disturbed by the. He didn't tell me this. He just sent me this like 3-page letter, just telling me all this horrible stuff and how my game was super damaging. And I normally just don't respond to any of that, but for whatever reason, I was kind of bored that night, so I responded. I wrote him back this long thing where I basically just blamed him for playing the game, and everything bad that he did in the game, I didn't make him do it as the game developer. So all the stuff that he was mad at me about was all stuff that he decided to do, which is ironically the whole point of the game. Which I told him, I was like, you kind of missed the whole point. The point is, one of my objectives in the game is for the player to quit the game before you hit a certain point. Like, I want the player to actually quit, because you're going to hit a point where it quits being great and you have to start doing bad things. And you're supposed to quit. As a matter of fact, if you try to quit, the game won't let you quit, and it starts like, it'll quit to your desktop, and then text will start appearing over your desktop saying like, I fucking quit. And anyway, all that to say, like, we had this little discourse back and forth, and he eventually, like, I guess, like, he saw the light. He bought the game again, positive review, and he told me at the end he was a child psychologist, and that's why it was so personal. I mean, he told me I also helped him save his marriage because it helped give him a better perspective.
Oh, God.
I'm not making this up. Like, that's just
I gotta publish that somewhere.
You really like redact things out. That's
He contacted a Twitch guy too, by the way, and the guy ended up doing a stream of it. And I joined the Twitch while I was on there, and that guy was on there like hyping the game. It's so weird. So yeah, if you get like a really negative later, like maybe you shouldn't respond. To it. I don't recommend it.
yeah. That is the Kama Sutra article right there.
Did you have a question? Okay.
It sounds like a good note to end on.
Yeah.
What's your Twitter handle?
Just Jon Oldblood.
You can write it up there if you want to. Over to the side on the whiteboard.
No, write it on the screen.
Okay.
John, thank you.